Welcome back. I'm really excited to be joined by David Robaire. So, David is a bassist, composer, and producer. He's co-led his own albums under the group name Holofoner, I believe is how it was pronounced, which I believe was produced by none other than the legendary and unfortunately recently departed Wayne Shorter. David is also an educator at California State University Northridge, and if that's not enough, he runs the new jazz vinyl label Sam First Records. I have heard some of the digital files, happen to have a copy of one of their releases from earlier this year. So I'll say both, David, thanks for joining me today, and I'm really excited for this discussion.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
So maybe first tell me about Sam First, the jazz club, and how that led you to start Sam First Records.
Sure. So Sam First, both the jazz club and the record label were started by the owner of this place. His name is Paul Solomon. He's he's a real visionary. Like he saw a need for a jazz club, especially on the west side of Los Angeles. He had access to a space that's right next to LAX airport, on the west side of LA. And, basically through all of his kind of combined tastes and the things he's interested in into one space. So he loves whiskey and mezcal. We have like a really beautiful whiskey and mezcal selection. He loves, really high-end jazz, and we have the best performers in the world playing here. And he loves photography, and the place is lined with these really beautiful photos that he actually took himself. So it's really like a combination of his tastes in one room. And then I was brought on to kind of help bring it to life, so to speak.
Wow, that's fantastic. It sounds like it combines many of my passions as well. This is something I need to think about.
Yeah.
Doing in the future, not in LA, but maybe somewhere else. So let me ask you from your standpoint, being a musician, was starting a label something that you always wanted to do, or was it something that you just sort of fell into?
Yeah, this was a really weird one that, I happened to, have fallen into a couple things, just being in the right place at the right time. And with Paul, that was actually the case with how we first met too. But, fast forward a few years, because we didn't start the label until we were about 3 years into having the venue. It really... I had always wanted to produce records. That's somewhere where I've always seen my career heading. I didn't necessarily know at what point in my career I would get there, but pre-COVID, I was performing a lot. I was teaching a lot. I was kind of burning the candle at all ends, running from place to place all the time. I saw that eventually my career would, kind of wind down to one particular area. And I thought production was really, acoustic jazz production was really where my love is. At the same time, working with Paul, there was kind of this constant talk of, we have this great club, there's all this great music happening. And he kept saying, why aren't we, recording these things at the very least for the sake of posterity, because otherwise it just comes and goes every night and it's out the door and nobody will ever know it happened except for the people who were here, or at least be able to experience it. So, he had a really great idea of starting a label to be associated with the club, and my kind of interest in producing records. I mean, it was just it was almost bizarre how perfect, of a fit both of our kind of passions, fit together there.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost an interesting evolution from COVID, right? So offering artists the opportunity to even just be seen from a wider audience, because I know that you guys also do streaming, or at least you have in the past from your YouTube channel. I remember during COVID, I would be on Instagram and I would get onto like Nicholas Payton's like live stream and be watching his stuff. And there's a lot of those kinds of opportunities in it. And it sort of happened out of necessity. And so now it's very interesting to me that you're treating the venue as a live performance space, but also a live recording space.
Yeah, it was like we were talking about it long time before COVID hit. And then when, but it was kind of just this idea. And I feel like when COVID hit, first of all, one thing that was really great was that Paul made it very clear that we were not closing down the club. We were going to stay open and tough it through. And, what can we do during COVID? And what can we do safely, responsibly, so we decided to start doing live stream, and we had some gear for our live sound system here, but it wasn't like really high end recording gear. It was more like decent live microphones, really good 16 channel live system here, and we started using that as the system to do live streams, and we got a nicer camera, and then we got a nicer this and that, and nicer headphones, but and it's one thing at a time. And then it kind of very quickly turned into like, okay, we're doing this. It keeps getting better and better. We keep talking about having a record label. Maybe now's the time for me to really invest my time into building what became kind of the studio here at the club.
Yeah, so to that point, your recording setup is more than the old school methods of live recording, or certainly me holding up a mini disc player and here's the thing. I mean, in some of those older, those scenarios, decades and decades ago, an engineer just sort of had to deal with the realities of the room and adjust as best they could. But instead, you've really seemed to curate the environment to enable the best acoustics, not only for that live audience, but then the best acoustics and the best results for those recordings as well. So I guess, and I'm just even like looking in the background there, I can tell that it's more than your average club. So can you speak, I guess, a little bit more to how the setup is designed and outfitted?
Sure. And I can even, if it makes sense, I can walk you through the room a little bit. It's a very small room, and I'm on a laptop, so it's all possible.
If it's not going to mess you up, that could be cool. I think it's for me and certainly for everybody else to get a sense of the club.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm in my little corner back here, which is pretty hip. I'll flip the computer around to show you. So this is our monitor. We have these Focal speakers. These are our preamps on this side. We have 16 channels of Grace preamps, and then right now we're shy 2 channels, but we have 22 channels total because we have these AEA ribbon pre's, which are great for our ribbon microphones. And then we have this is our A to D converter, the Lynx system, the Aurora. It sounds so beautiful. All of this is very like clear and colorless, and really kind of helps us really capture the room the way it sounds here. This here, the Monitor 8, I don't know if I'm doing a good job of showing you, but this is our live rig. So everything, it's really great actually that our preamps have analog out to the Lynx so that the Lynx can get us into Pro Tools, in an analog route. But they also have ADAT going out so we can go directly into the house system 8 channels at a time just through one simple cable. So all of that gets sent to the house system, so we have separate mixes for both. And then just a bunch of hard drives and stuff over on that side. And then back here, you can see, I'll walk you around the room a little, but you can see these photographs that line the wall, kind of what I was talking about earlier. These were all taken by Paul. He's traveled quite a bit. And a lot of these, like this one I know was taken at a baseball game in Cuba. Really love the colors of this one. Yeah. And this one next to it. Love this. I don't know if I'm getting a good view of it, but this is like a matador in Spain. You can just see like the bullfight.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, walk you around the perimeter here. You got all these pictures around the edge, and then we don't usually see the club during daytime. We have a lot of natural light come in during day, but here's the performance area. Our piano's covered right now, but we have a lot of curvature around the space, which is actually really helpful for the acoustics. The room was designed by an acoustician before I came into the mix. Paul had brought somebody in to make sure that everything was going to sound the best way that it could for live music here. What's also helpful is this stuff above me, which a lot of people think is wood. It's actually like this industrial food processing tubing. It's just like plastic. And it lines the whole ceiling of the place and some of the walls. and there's actually about 2 feet of ceiling above it, so it
Oh
kind
wow.
of breaks up the sound in a really good way. And we kind of lose some frequencies up there that we don't need bouncing back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, room treatment is critical, right?
Yeah.
To disperse and eliminate echoes and bass traps and all that kind of stuff. So that's
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, I know so little about that side of things, and I'm so grateful that that was worked out before I came into the mix. Because I walked in here, and on the first day, I mean, that Paul and I talk about it, that like the first time I walked in, I just kind of said something, and then I clapped in the room, and I was like, "Oh man," because it's such a small room, you can get the vibe immediately, and it kind of sounds very similar no matter where you are in the room. You don't lose. It's not like, oh, if you sit over there, you lose the bass. Some rooms are like that, but we don't have that issue here, which is great.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's the sort of like ideal listening space again. Whether honestly, whether it's live or whether you're listening to vinyl, probably. So let me ask you this: what is the strategy, I guess, with booking specific artists, and then maybe moving from this idea of booking to deciding to record?
Yeah, so the recording, everything that we record, everything that we want to present on the label, which is obviously far fewer, projects than we have with booking shows here. It's very specific to our taste in a lot of ways. Paul is kind of a tastemaker. I would say that, both of us, in a sense, like what we're doing here is, yeah, booking the room, but it's really curating. I mean, there's way more people reaching out about booking shows than we could ever present music for, and it's the sad reality too that there are so many ridiculously talented musicians and so few places in LA to play, which is kind of a real drag about the scene here. The scene just keeps getting stronger and stronger, but we're there are only so many venues here for creative music, unfortunately. So we book things that we really believe in. We talk pretty seriously about does this pass by you? Does this pass by me? Do we both agree that it's something that will fit well with our audience? Does it fit well with the rest of the calendar? Does it make sense to book this person? And it really has to check a lot of boxes for us to say yes. And so there are some pretty great musicians that unfortunately just haven't worked out because, again, it's just there are only so many days of the week, and we have to be competitive to a certain degree. So when it came to recording for the label, it was really like taking that thing and narrowing it down to even a smaller scope of like, who are the people who we really, really stand behind and whose music represents what we represent at the club, because it's in a lot of ways it's representative of, the full calendar that we have. It's kind of funny to think that 5 records could represent 6 years of live shows here, literally thousands of shows, so.
Yeah. Wow. I was thinking about that because it's difficult to say with 5 records so far that there is a signature sound. You may have it in your head about what that signature sound is, but I think it's unfair to say just from looking at 5 records to say, oh, this is a signature sound. What I will say though is that there is some um, it feels like there is some ties across the music, even though it goes from, I think, there's a couple of piano trio recordings. There's the I have the Joe La Barbara
Yeah,
quintet here,
yeah.
right, which incorporates a couple of horns in trumpet and saxophone, and so there is it isn't just that kind of quiet, moody piano trio. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily expect to hear, say, a raucous free jazz recording at this venue either, right?
Right. So we definitely have a wide scope of music that we like, and music that we find to be creative and interesting, and still representative of what we do here. With, let me think. Like, I would say that one of the common themes for us is that Paul and I really love the way that our particular piano sounds in our room. And so there is an attraction to wanting to record piano centric or piano focused records. But that being said, we've already done plenty of that with the 5 projects that we've done. And piano seems to be involved in the other projects that we record as well. So we're not really losing it at all. So I would say that the common thread really is the sound of the room. And that's really what we're trying to present is, we have the same gear, more or less, that we've used for all of the sessions. We've acquired some new stuff since the first session, and for the most part the same engineers working on all of the recordings, and I've been the producer on all the recordings. So the idea is that the common thread, is the room and is the kind of overall vibe of Sam First. And when we have more records to put out there, I would see more commonalities, I think, between them. But we also tried to space out these five in a way, like Joe LaBarbera, like what you were mentioning. I mean, that's like hard bop at its finest, but it's really seriously hard bop. And I wouldn't describe any of the other four recordings as hard bop. Like definitely modern piano trio in the Justin Coughlin example, but like super modern piano trio in the Jeff Babco Clam City example, so it's kind of all over the place, but all still, music that you would find here at Sam First, I guess, there's the
That
thread.
makes a lot of sense, and it's interesting too to kind of see, and I know that the vinyl, it doesn't even necessarily capture all of the songs that were recorded and that are part of the digital download, and so it's kind of fun though to be able to see even within just say this specific album, a couple of familiar songs, right? There's a Duke Pearson title, there's a John Coltrane title, in addition to a couple of originals, but then there's also this kind of highlighting some of these pianists as composers as well, right? So it does kind of feel like a mix of more of that contemporary modern thing, but also bringing forward some of these songs that maybe folks are a little bit more familiar with. Um,
And I just want to add one thing about Joe that's really important, is that Joe is one of these guys who's been around for decades, right? He's got a career that is part of the history, playing with, people like Chuck Mangione to Bill Evans to everybody, right? But Joe, no matter what, and I know this firsthand because I've gotten the opportunity to play quite a bit with him, he is the hippest guy on the planet. It doesn't matter what his age is. It doesn't matter how long he's been around. That guy is open to anything at any time. And so I think that there's, even though when I listen to that, I definitely get thrown into a different place than when I listen to, one of the other recordings, I definitely feel like there's still this kind of progressive mentality in his kind of approach to hard bop. It's, even though it's rooted in his roots in the 60s and 70s, it's also just got this like, yeah, we're still going for it thing.
yeah, very cool. Yeah, it's what I was just thinking about is uh, as a musician, if you're in a space that you feel inspired, then then it's going to produce better quality, right? And so if you have an audience who is appreciative of the type of the type of music that's being played, if you have a venue that's very complimentary to the music, and the musician can hear themselves and they can hear each other, you're going to get a better performance, and that's going to be better on vinyl and better in digital and better for everybody, right?
You're hitting the nail on the head. There are so many factors that play into why a record is great. So many factors. Like we, as a consumer, we may look at a record and just see the names listed on it and think that those names are the factors, but that is not it. What they ate for breakfast that day plays into how they played. You know what I mean? Like if somebody is still, feeling like crap from the red eye that they took the night before, that's going to play into how they play. Somebody snapped a string on their instrument right before they play. That's going to affect. So there are only so many things you can plan for. I feel like my job as the producer is to put all the pieces into place so that hopefully everything will go the best that it can given the circumstance, make the circumstances the best they can, provide the place so that people can say, oh, I was at the right time at the right place,
Yeah, for sure. That makes total sense. So let me ask you, because I'm interested in a couple of things. Obviously, I want to learn more about some of these recordings, including what's been released, but also what's upcoming. But I want to kind of set the stage for what it is that Sam First Records is putting out, because on my little YouTube channel, we often talk about vinyl, both new releases, new music, brand new music, as well as old stuff. This is more than just vinyl releases, and it's even more than just vinyl and digital, 24-bit high res digital files. So first of all, I'll say a couple of things, and I'm kind of curious for you to sort of package this and kind of explain, I guess, the perspective. So first of all, the vinyl is in quite limited quantity. Some titles may be as few as 175 or 200 copies. You also have what you're calling the Sam First Records project experience, that includes content about the creative process. There's the ability to actually book some of these artists. And so in my mind, when I saw it, or when I was kind of absorbing some of this, it simultaneously feels a little bit inspired from, say, a GoFundMe kind of thing, where there's the ability to customize, I guess, how you want to interact with the artist and the music. And to some degree, these almost are this sort of nod to decades ago, where a vinyl record was in some ways a business card for some of these musicians to say, this is what I'm about. So I'm curious how you thought about, I guess, packaging all of these things together.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that went into it. I had previously mentioned that when we started the label, we had started as a partnership with Artist Share, and Artist Share. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they were the first ever like direct to fan funding platform. So prior to GoFundMe and prior to all of those, so we did get a lot of those ideas and concepts through that partnership with Artist Share. But all in all, it's kind of a similar mentality to what we're about here, which is we're geared towards the super fans. We understand and realize that the jazz listening world, while there are quite a few people out there, it's nothing, in terms of numbers compared to the pop listening, the popular music trends of the world, right? So we have to deal with those realities, and we have to reach the people who are so interested in the music that, they're more likely, like, I think as a musician who came up playing in the early 2000s and stuff, what you were saying about a business card, like everybody has a CD as a business card, right? In my era, or whatever you want to call it. So everybody has a CD that they produce as their business card. That's just kind of their regular thing, right? But when you're selling CDs at a show, you're basically saying, my tickets to my show are $20 or $25. Here's my CD, it's $20. That's the maximum I will let you contribute towards my music. You don't give the audience member or the customer any sort of opportunity to give more if they feel, like this is something that they really truly believe in. So there is, of course, GoFundMe and all these programs that really inspire, contributions, campaign contributions. We try not to look at it like that. It's really more, we have this unique situation. We have this amazing room. We have these amazing acoustics, and we have these ridiculous musicians who love playing here. So we have the ability to, like you mentioned, set up a private concert here. So we did this, for instance, with Josh Nelson. Somebody purchased a private concert with Josh Nelson and his band, and they brought their entire company here. And we were able to provide this beautiful room for Josh and the group to do their thing. And it was amazing, and it was a Sunday afternoon when we don't usually have music anyway. So there's a lot of ways we could kind of, market what we're doing towards the super fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally think, especially as a non-musician, or at least I don't play anymore, the ability to kind of, what's the way to put it? I think to some degree, people feel maybe a little bit further distanced from a lot of the music that they like as the years have gone by, because people aren't buying as much physical medium. And one of the reasons why, say, vinyl collectors such as myself like the vinyl experience is because it does feel like you get a little bit closer to that musician, and the ability to, like I said, even have, like, whether it's an autographed item or whether it's original art. I do look for some of those opportunities, especially for certain musicians and certain types of releases. Like I look for those opportunities. So it's very interesting to me that this is part of the offering.
Yeah, and you mentioned before, like, about the limited quantities. At first it was really just like, we're trying this thing out. We want to see how many we can sell. We want to be realistic. It's also, extremely expensive to print limited quantities of vinyl. So in some ways it's productive, in some ways it's counterproductive, but we needed to kind of feel it out and see what was going to work for us moving forward. So for the first three projects, we agreed to just doing 200 copies. But for the Rachel Eckroth release that just came out and the Clam City one that's coming out soon, we did 500. And for those, we stepped it up a notch too, with the kind of collector's item bits, because we put numbered copies. So all of these are individual foil stamped numbered copies out of 500. It's pretty pretty beautiful packaging, actually. We did all the packaging through Furnace, and they did a really wonderful job. So
Very cool. So to that point, so you mentioned the Rachel Eckroth release that just came out, I think, on the 3rd of November, which would have put it last Friday.
yeah, exactly. She played Friday and Saturday at the club, and we got the records just in time for the release.
Okay, very cool. And that one's titled Humanoid. Is that right?
Yep.
All right, and then there's also this one that's the sort of interesting, perhaps band name, I think is Clam City. So
Clam
tell me
City.
about Clam City and
Yeah.
when is that one coming out?
Okay, so Clam City, I don't know if you're familiar with Jeff Babco. Jeff is just a ridiculously talented pianist and keyboardist here in LA. Also, just amazing guy, hilarious, really fun to be around. He's the pianist for many years on the Jimmy Kimmel show. So if you ever watch Jimmy Kimmel, you'd know him in the band immediately. But he's played with literally everybody and everybody in the jazz world to the fusion world, crossing over into the pop world. He's great. So Jeff is old friends and old pals with Tim LaFave and Mark Juliana, and they came in and did a trio gig, a couple trio nights a few years ago. And it was just one of those nights that Paul and I just could not stop talking about afterwards, because it was like nothing we had had here before. It was totally adventurous. Totally, yeah, we have adventurous music all the time, but there was just something about the camaraderie between these three guys and the fact that they were just totally on the same page and exploring. And Jeff is great with keyboards, so sometimes Tim will take the lead in the upper parts of the bass, and Jeff's playing all these Moog bass parts, and Mark's doing his thing. I mean, it was so great. So it was a really nice combination of compositions, kind of morphing into explorations. And we had it in our minds for a while, like, we got to bring this band back and record them. So we reached out to Jeff, and we, found the time to make it happen and made it happen. But otherwise, this group was more or less formed for gigs here at Sam First. And my hope is that, with this record reaching the masses, that this group will be on tour promoting the record, because it's pretty special. Yeah.
Yeah, I can attest. I heard some of those high res files, and it does sound fantastic. That's a really great release. So how about Rachel Eckroth? So Humanoid is what's the format of this? Is this a quintet, or is this?
This is a quartet with Andrew Renfro on guitar. Man, Andrew's so amazing. He's been such a huge asset to LA's scene since he moved here a couple of years ago. But yeah, Andrew's on guitar, Tina Raymond on drums, and really good friend of mine, Billy Moeller, on bass. Billy's another one of those great crossover musicians, plays with everybody from Dolly Parton to Smashing Pumpkins to, Rachel Eckroth. You're at Sam First, But same thing with Rachel. She's plays with Saint Vincent. She plays with like all these super heavy, pop musicians as well. And meanwhile, she's this amazing jazz pianist and composer. It's great to see all these people cross over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, listening to some of those tracks, that even just the presence of the guitar was, I would say, both maybe initially surprising, but it worked so well. I feel like with that format and in that space, it just sounded really good.
Rachel says, I think it's in the liner notes of the record, I can't remember, but she says in an interview about how Andrew is the perfect guitarist to play with as a pianist. And I think that there's so much to be said for that. I mean, guitarists and pianists, no matter how brilliant of musicians they are, a lot of times, pianists are not, there are a lot of great pianists who just don't work well with guitarists and vice versa. And so to find these relationships where you have a pianist and guitarist who really know how to not just, not play when the other one is playing, but find ways to actually play together and support each other is pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, because I want to make sure that I mention, I know that we talked a little bit about Joe LaBarbera's release, and but there's also two others that I believe are by pianists. So there's Justin Coughlin's release, and and then you mentioned Josh Nelson, and actually you play on one of these releases as well, right?
Yeah, so it's funny. I played on Justin's release, which was the first record that I played on of Justin's, which is ironic because I've played on a bunch of Josh's older records, but was not the bassist on. I haven't played in Josh's group for several years, so it made much more sense, of course, for him to have his current bassist in there. But I it felt really nice to play on the first release. At the same time, I didn't want to, put myself in that position. I kind of waited for Justin to present the idea that maybe I should play bass on it. Because I was going to be producing it either way. And quite frankly, it was really tough for the first record that I was producing for the label to also be thinking about playing and thinking about the music from that perspective. It almost made me think like, okay, I should keep these separate for a little while before I start playing on projects I produce. Yeah, it's a lot to think about. It's a bit overwhelming sometimes.
No, it's at the same time that it must be overwhelming from my perspective. Not living in your shoes. It just sounds like a blast. So
it is. I mean, when I listen back to it, I'm like, okay, it all worked out. I'm happy. I'm very, very happy with the way everything worked out. It was just, there was a lot of heart and soul that went into every aspect of it in order to make sure that it all got to the point that it was at.
Yeah. So I, like I said, I got my hands on some of the high resolution files, and I will say, because my setup here in this room is fairly modest, mostly built for vinyl, I invited myself over to a friend's house here in Atlanta who focuses his listening on high res digital. And then we got another buddy in who works at an Atlanta hi-fi shop that specializes in like just the super high end gear, right? Like you go into their like fully outfitted rooms and it's, $500,000 to $1 million to get their setup, to reproduce that setup. And what we did is we played a couple of these albums, and all three of us were just blown away by the sound. And I will say, not only from the digital side, because I have this copy of the Joe LaBarbera title that I got in just the other day on vinyl, I can attest that the vinyl sounds fantastic as well, even in my modest setup. So yeah, I'm super excited for all five of these titles and what you guys have coming out in the future as well. So let me ask you this. So the jazz scene feels very much alive and well these days, and I'm curious, what musicians are you excited about these days that either you think just generally we should keep our eye on, or who you would love to record?
Whoa, gosh. There are a ton. I'll speak really personally here, and he's gonna be happy to know that I give him a shout out here. But there's a really phenomenal young pianist who I've known since he was in college. His name is Adam Hirsch, and I keep recommending him for various projects because literally anything that I throw him on, he just totally kills it. Everything from acoustic piano settings to multi-stack keyboard weather report stuff. He's absolutely incredible, and the people who he associates himself with, plays with a lot. An incredible bassist named Jermaine Paul and a drummer named Miles Martin. These guys were all students of mine at one point when I used to teach at Cal State Northridge, and they're all ridiculously talented people, very, very much present on the scene here. So watching them, being here at the club and watching them, come in and like backing up people like Gerald Clayton, who's one of my somebody in my generation, but then here are my former students playing with it. I'm like, nothing makes me more proud, So there's definitely an aspect of like, oh, I want to capture this while it's happening, because this is like, I've known these guys since they were really young, and holy crap, they sound amazing right now, and they're just getting started. These guys are like barely old enough to be at the club, let alone, playing with the people they're playing. So I highly recommend checking out all three of those guys, and I hope, because since they play together so much, I hope that there's a chance for us to do a project with the three of them together.
All right. Well, thanks so much, David, for taking the time to chat. I personally think this is super cool. Just the ability to give, fans of music a top tier experience, again, both in person, but plus the ability for some of us who live maybe a little bit far away, to get this great music into our homes and to be able to experience it and kind of still have that sort of live experience. So for those interested in checking out Sam First Records releases, you can go to samfirstrecords.com. And then you can also head over to YouTube. And by the way, I'm going to link both of these in the description. You can head over to their YouTube channel and check out Sam First on YouTube, both for excerpts from these albums, but also they have like live streamed complete performances that they posted during the pandemic as well. And I highly recommend you checking that out as well. So, David, thanks again very much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time.